Timmy Williams, a toddler just 18 months old, was peacefully sleeping in his small room in the modest wooden house on the outskirts of Pine Hollow. It was another night like any other. Sarah and George Williams, Timmy's parents, had tucked him into bed, kissed his forehead, and wished him good night. Late into the night, as everything was quiet, the young couple rested after a long day of work. Sarah and George could never have imagined that night, their peaceful life would be shattered in the most unsettling way. The next morning, when the sunlight poured through the window, Sarah woke up and, as usual, went to Timmy's room to wake him. But when she entered the room, she immediately felt something was wrong. Timmy was not on his bed, and the room was eerily silent. Sarah turned to George, then rushed through the house, checking every room, but Timmy was nowhere to be found. Her heart raced with a growing sense of dread. She looked again at the crib where her son had been, and everything seemed just as it was, without any sign of disturbance. At this point, George woke up and immediately realized something was wrong. Timmy could not have left the bed by himself. He was too young to do such a thing. They started to check every corner of the house, from the upstairs to the downstairs, leaving no room unchecked, but there was still no sign of their son. By now, Sarah was feeling terrified, her hands trembling as she urgently called the police. The search teams would be out looking for Timmy immediately. But in their hearts, they could not understand how or why Timmy had gone missing. The police and search teams quickly arrived, organizing search parties throughout the town and surrounding areas. Pine Hollow was filled with worry, and no one could explain the strange disappearance of Timmy. The police searched for an entire day, scouring every inch of the area, but there were no traces of the little boy. Investigators and search teams felt confused, unable to find any clue. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints, no blood, nothing to indicate that Timmy had been taken or encountered any harm. How could a toddler, just 18 months old, have disappeared in the middle of the night without leaving a single trace? What made the situation even more perplexing was the dense woods surrounding Pine Hollow. This forest was a thick, untamed area with no clear trails. There were no campsites near the house, and the closest ones were miles away. The police combed through the woods, but it was vast, and apart from the dense trees, there was nothing unusual. Investigators started to believe that perhaps Timmy had wandered off. But how could such a small child have made it out there on his own in the dead of night without leaving a trace? It simply didn't make sense. Days later, while the search continued, a strange discovery was made. A group of hunters, while exploring the woods nearby, spotted a large bear. This bear had a long scar on its face and was known in local folklore as Old Scar. It was an old bear, one that had appeared in the Pine Hollow area many times before, but had never exhibited any unusual behavior. This time, however, the bear was moving very close to where Timmy had gone missing. What shocked everyone was that the bear did not attack or run away when it saw humans. It simply stood still, only about 20 feet away from Timmy. Watching the little boy, the hunters felt uneasy and tried to approach. But the bear did nothing. It just stood there, silent, as if guarding the child. Why was the bear behaving this way? Was it a normal wild animal? Or was something more unusual happening in these woods? This question left everyone bewildered. The bear, which was known as a fierce wild creature, was now acting in a way completely contrary to the nature of bears. Instead of attacking or fleeing, the bear remained still and stared at Timmy, as though protecting him. No one could explain this behavior. The investigators thought that perhaps the bear had been keeping Timmy safe from other wild animals in the forest. But the bigger question remained: why was Timmy out there, in the woods? At that time, the search continued, but no one could explain this strange event. The story of Timmy Williams and Old Scar quickly spread throughout Pine Hollow, causing the townspeople to begin questioning the old tales they had heard about the forest around them. Could there be some mystical force at work in these woods? Or was it just a bizarre coincidence? Everyone wondered what exactly had happened to Timmy that night, and whether the bear, Old Scar, was an invisible guardian, or simply a coincidental presence in an event that defied explanation. The morning following the discovery of the bear, the search teams resumed their efforts with renewed urgency. With every passing hour, hope grew that Timmy might still be found. As the hours stretched on, the air was thick with tension. Everyone in Pine Hollow, from the local residents to the search volunteers, felt a palpable sense of dread. What had happened to the little boy? Was he still alive, or had he fallen prey to the dangers of the forest? But as the search parties scoured the woods once again, something miraculous happened. A rescue team, searching the area near where Old Scar had been spotted, came upon a sight that left them in stunned silence. There, nestled in a small clearing, was Timmy, alive and seemingly unharmed. The little boy was sitting on the ground, his innocent face painted with the marks of a child who had wandered through the wilderness for hours. He was covered in dirt, his clothes slightly torn, but there were no cuts, bruises, or signs of injury. Most astonishing of all, the searchers could see that he had been alone all this time, except for one thing. From a distance, watching quietly, was Old Scar, the massive bear. As the rescue team carefully approached Timmy, Old Scar remained in the background, keeping her distance but never straying far. She watched intently, her eyes never leaving the boy. The team members were baffled. The bear didn't act aggressively, nor did she seem to pose a threat. It was as if Old Scar was standing guard over Timmy, protecting him in a way that defied all logic. The bear didn't intervene, didn't charge, didn't attack. She simply stood there, a silent and watchful figure in the woods. As the team gently gathered Timmy and began to carry him back to safety, Old Scar followed him at a respectful distance, still watching but never coming closer. It wasn't until they reached the edge of the forest that the bear turned and disappeared back into the trees, leaving the search team and the people of Pine Hollow to ponder what had just occurred. How had Timmy survived the night in the woods? And why had the bear shown him such strange, protective behavior? The weeks following Timmy's safe return were filled with questions and wonder. Local authorities and wildlife experts quickly became involved in trying to understand the bear's actions. Scientists, animal behaviorists, and experts in wildlife conservation all weighed in on the situation, trying to make sense of what had happened. As they examined Old Scar's history, they learned something surprising, something that would help explain her unusual actions. Many years ago, Old Scar had lost her own cub. The tragedy of that loss had deeply affected her, and it was believed that her maternal instincts had never fully recovered. As the experts dug deeper, they found that Old Scar had a reputation for being fiercely territorial, a trait common in many bears. She had been known to protect her territory aggressively, often driving away other animals from her domain. However, this territorial behavior was not what had prompted her to act differently when she encountered Timmy. No, it was something far more instinctual. Something that spoke to the deeper, more primal nature of the bear. When Old Scar had come upon Timmy in the woods, something inside her had triggered, something deep within the animal's psyche. In that moment, her maternal instincts had been awakened. It wasn't just that she had found an intruder in her territory, but that she had encountered a vulnerable, helpless creature that, in some way, reminded her of the cub she had lost so many years ago. It was as if Old Scar had seen Timmy not just as a human child, but as something more, a living being in need of protection. And she had responded accordingly. She had stood guard over him, as any mother bear might do for her own cub, showing a level of care and concern that no one could have expected. For Timmy's parents, Sarah and George, the discovery of their son's safe return was both a relief and a source of deep concern. They were overjoyed that Timmy had come back to them, but they couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was not quite right. Why had the bear protected their son? What had driven Old Scar to act in such a manner? Sarah and George were overwhelmed with gratitude, but they also had a multitude of questions that no one seemed able to answer. As the days passed, the couple began to work closely with local authorities, including wildlife conservationists and park rangers, to ensure that the forest around Pine Hollow remained protected. While no one could truly explain the mysterious bond between Old Scar and their son, Sarah and George knew that something needed to be done to prevent another incident like this. They worked to raise awareness about the bears in the area, encouraging the community to respect the natural world and the animals that lived in it. Sarah and George also pushed for better safety measures to ensure that children and families would not wander into the woods unaccompanied. The local reaction to the events surrounding Timmy's disappearance and the bear's protective role was mixed. While many were thrilled to see the boy safely returned, there was a palpable sense of unease among the residents of Pine Hollow. Some were grateful for the bear's actions, seeing it as a kind of guardian spirit watching over the town. Others, however, were fearful. The idea of a wild bear, known for its territorial nature, wandering so close to homes and families was unsettling to many. They wondered if the forest was becoming more dangerous, if Old Scar's maternal instincts might lead her to protect other children, or even become a threat to others who ventured too far into her territory. Timmy's parents, however, chose to focus on the positive. They had their son back, and despite the questions surrounding the bear's actions, they felt a deep sense of gratitude. They were not interested in fear or superstition. They simply wanted to understand the events that had transpired and ensure that their town remained a safe place for everyone. They worked closely with authorities to help protect both the community and the wildlife, hoping that through education and awareness, future encounters like the one Timmy had experienced could be prevented. In the end, the story of Timmy and Old Scar became a tale that would be passed down through generations in Pine Hollow. It was a story of mystery, of a wild creature's unexpected kindness, and of the bond between a child and an animal in the wild. For Sarah and George, it was a story that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, a story of both wonder and gratitude. A story that they would share with Timmy as he grew up, reminding him of the strange and inexplicable events that had saved his life. As the years passed, Timmy Williams grew into a lively, curious child, his memory of the strange events that had surrounded his disappearance remained with him. And as he became more vocal, he began to speak about the bear he had encountered in the woods. To his parents, Sarah and George, it was a story he seemed to tell with a sense of familiarity. As if the bear, Old Scar, was more than just an animal he had met during a strange and terrifying night. Timmy spoke of the bear as if she were a friend, recounting how she had kept watch over him in the woods, her steady presence a comforting shield in the darkness. At first, Sarah and George were unsure of how to respond. They had been so overwhelmed with fear and gratitude when Timmy had returned to them that they hadn't fully processed the strange connection their son had developed with Old Scar. But as time went on, Timmy's words grew more specific. He would often tell them that the bear was still watching over him, keeping an eye on him from a distance. Sometimes, he would claim that he could feel her presence nearby, though he never actually saw her. For Timmy, Old Scar wasn't just a bear from a story, it was a part of his life. A constant, silent guardian who he believed was there to protect him. The more Timmy spoke of Old Scar, the more Sarah and George found themselves intrigued by their son's unwavering belief in the bear's protective nature. While they never doubted that the bear had played a role in his safety during that terrifying night, they couldn't explain how Timmy could have developed such a strong bond with her. It wasn't just a child's fanciful imagination, it seemed as if Timmy truly believed that the bear was looking out for him. Even after all these years. Soon, something curious began to happen. Old Scar reappeared in Pine Hollow during times of danger, particularly when natural events threatened the town, when powerful storms rolled in, when lightning struck nearby trees, or when heavy rain flooded the town's streets. Old Scar would show up, usually in the distance, watching over the people of Pine Hollow. At first, it was easy to dismiss these sightings as coincidental, but as they became more frequent, they began to feel deliberate. The bear seemed to have an uncanny sense of when the town was in need, and she would appear to observe, as though ensuring the safety of the community. On a few occasions, Old Scar even seemed to help in more direct ways. During one particularly violent storm, a group of hikers got lost in the woods. Separated from their group, the search teams combed the area for hours, but the dense forest made it difficult to find anyone. As the search grew desperate, some of the locals began to mention that Old Scar had been spotted nearby. The search team decided to follow the leads and, to their astonishment, they found the hikers, disoriented but unharmed, near the same area where Old Scar had been seen. The bear had not harmed them, but it was clear that her presence had somehow guided the rescuers to the lost group. The locals began to wonder if there was more to Old Scar than anyone had first realized. Timmy, of course, was thrilled by these events. He would excitedly tell his parents that Old Scar had come to help again, that she had watched over the hikers just as she had once watched over him. His bond with the bear, although mysterious, seemed to deepen as he grew older. As he explored the woods near Pine Hollow, Timmy would often feel the sensation of being watched. Sometimes, he would turn a corner or walk along a trail and catch a glimpse of a large shape moving in the distance. But when he looked closely, the bear would be gone. He knew, in his heart, that it was Old Scar keeping an eye on him. This growing connection between Timmy and Old Scar did not go unnoticed. Researchers, particularly those studying animal behavior and the emotional bonds between humans and animals, began to take interest in the unusual relationship between the boy and the bear. Scientists had long been fascinated by the complex emotions that animals could experience. And Old Scar's behavior was proving to be something unique. Her willingness to protect Timmy, and later the town of Pine Hollow, was not typical of most wild animals, even those known for their territorial behavior. Some researchers believed that there was more to the connection than instinct or mere territoriality. They theorized that Old Scar might be responding to some deeper emotional trigger, one that went beyond what had been previously understood. As Timmy grew older, the scientists began to observe his interactions with Old Scar from a distance. They noted how, when Timmy ventured into the woods, Old Scar would appear in the background, always keeping a careful watch. It wasn't just that the bear was protecting him from potential danger, she seemed to be following him, ensuring his safety as he navigated the forest, almost as if she recognized him as her own. The researchers were particularly interested in how Timmy interacted with Old Scar. Even when he didn't see her, it was as if the bond between the boy and the bear had transcended the physical realm, with Timmy sensing her presence and Old Scar responding in kind. Some of the researchers who studied Old Scar began to explore the possibility of an emotional connection between the two. Could it be that Timmy and Old Scar shared some kind of mutual understanding? Could the bear, having lost her own cub years ago, have formed a protective attachment to Timmy, as though he were her own? And what of Timmy? Could he, even at such a young age, have sensed the bear's protective instincts and developed a deep emotional bond with her? The questions were vast and complex, and the answers seemed just beyond reach. For Sarah and George, the growing connection between their son and the bear was both a source of fascination and concern. They were grateful for Old Scar's protection and had come to accept the strange role the bear played in their lives. But as Timmy grew older, they also worried about the implications of this bond. What would happen as Timmy ventured further into the woods? Would Old Scar continue to follow him as he grew up? Or would the bond eventually fade away? And what about the rest of the town? Was it safe for Old Scar to continue her interactions with the people of Pine Hollow? While no one could say for certain what the future held, one thing was clear: the connection between Timmy and Old Scar had left an indelible mark on both of their lives. It was a bond forged in the wilderness, in the depths of the forest, and it was a reminder of the mysterious, inexplicable ways in which the natural world can reach out to touch our lives. Whether or not science would ever fully explain the connection between the boy and the bear, one thing was certain: Timmy and Old Scar had formed a bond that would last a lifetime. A bond that neither time nor distance could erase. As the years went by, the mystery of Old Scar's protective actions grew more complex and fascinating. Researchers continued to study the bear's behavior, trying to understand the deep connection between her and Timmy. Through extensive investigation, wildlife experts uncovered more details about Old Scar's past, offering a clearer picture of why she had acted the way she had toward the young boy. It was not simply a matter of animal instinct, as many had initially assumed. There was a deeper story that had shaped Old Scar's behavior, one that tied her to the very essence of loss, grief, and motherhood. It was revealed that many years ago, Old Scar had lost her own cub, tragically and violently. The cub had been caught in a trap set by hunters, an event that left a permanent scar in the bear's life. The experts found evidence of this loss when they examined Old Scar's history. The bear had lived through the profound sorrow of losing her own offspring. And it had taken a toll on her. She had spent years wandering alone, her once fierce territorial instincts tempered by grief and loss. This pain had shaped her, making her far more cautious and protective of the vulnerable creatures she encountered, especially those who reminded her of her lost cub. When Old Scar had first encountered Timmy in the woods, something in her had shifted. The presence of the child, a helpless, defenseless being, had stirred a deep maternal instinct that had lain dormant since the death of her cub. Old Scar didn't just see a child, she saw something she had lost. Timmy, in her eyes, became a symbol of the care and protection she had once provided, but could no longer give to her own cub. It was as if the bear's grief had found a new focus in the boy. A chance for her to offer protection once again. In that moment, her maternal instincts had kicked in. Not because of territorial need, but because she had recognized Timmy as a vulnerable being who needed care, just as her own cub once had. This revelation sent ripples through the scientific community, as it helped to explain the bond between Timmy and Old Scar. What had seemed like an extraordinary act of kindness from a wild animal was actually the result of deep, unresolved emotional wounds. Old Scar had become more than just a guardian of the forest, she had become a protector in the truest sense, motivated by the love and loss she had experienced in her own life. This new understanding deepened the community's respect and admiration for the bear. And soon, Old Scar became a figure of reverence in Pine Hollow. The townspeople of Pine Hollow began to view Old Scar in a new light. She was no longer just a wild animal to be feared or avoided. The bear had earned the town's admiration and gratitude, and many began to see her as a symbol of something greater. To the people of Pine Hollow, she was a protector, a guardian who watched over them with a silent, unspoken vigilance. The bond she had shared with Timmy was seen as a manifestation of a greater, more universal connection between humans and nature, an understanding that went beyond the boundaries of species and that spoke to the shared need for protection and care. Timmy, in particular, felt a deep sense of gratitude and connection to Old Scar. As he grew older, he began to realize the profound impact the bear had had on his life. Her presence had shaped his childhood, and as he matured, he found himself more attuned to the natural world around him. The experiences he had with Old Scar fostered a deep compassion for animals and a desire to understand their behaviors and needs. Timmy's bond with the bear had opened his eyes to the intricate relationships that exist between humans and animals, and he began to develop an innate understanding of animal behavior. Timmy's connection with Old Scar also led him to become an advocate for wildlife conservation and animal rights. As he matured, he started to speak publicly about the importance of protecting animals and their habitats. His story with Old Scar had inspired him to pursue a deeper understanding of the natural world, and he began to share his knowledge with others. He would often give talks at local schools, explaining the emotional connections that can exist between humans and animals, and how these connections can foster greater empathy and respect for all living creatures. For Sarah and George, watching their son grow into someone so compassionate and thoughtful was both heartwarming and bittersweet. They had always known that Timmy was special, but the bond he had with Old Scar had shaped him in ways they never could have imagined. Timmy's experiences with the bear had taught him valuable lessons about love, loss, and the importance of protecting the natural world. His relationship with Old Scar had sparked a lifelong interest in wildlife conservation, and he soon found himself working alongside environmental groups to protect the forests around Pine Hollow and ensure the safety of the animals that called it home. In recognition of Old Scar's role as a protector and a symbol of the bond between humans and animals, Sarah and George decided to take action. They worked with local authorities, conservationists, and the people of Pine Hollow to establish a sanctuary in the woods, a safe haven for both wildlife and people. The sanctuary would serve as a place where the town's residents could learn about the importance of protecting nature, and where animals like Old Scar could live freely without fear of encroachment. The sanctuary was designed to honor the bear's protective nature and ensure that the forest remained a safe and thriving environment for all creatures. The creation of the sanctuary was not just a gesture of gratitude, but a commitment to preserving the legacy of Old Scar's protective role. Sarah and George wanted to ensure that future generations would understand the significance of the bond between Timmy and the bear, and how that bond had shaped the community. The sanctuary became a place of learning and reflection, where people could come to understand the importance of conservation and the deep, often unexplored connections between humans and animals. As Timmy continued to grow and learn, his connection with the natural world deepened. He became a respected figure in the community, known for his work with wildlife conservation and his dedication to protecting the environment. His story with Old Scar had not only changed his life, but it had also changed the lives of those around him. The bond they shared was a reminder of the profound impact that nature can have on our lives, and how, sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected places. The sanctuary stood as a testament to that connection, a place where the legacy of Old Scar's protection and Timmy's love for the natural world would live on for generations to come. As the years rolled on, time began to take its toll on Old Scar. The once powerful bear, whose reputation had become legendary in Pine Hollow, was now showing signs of age. Her movements had slowed, and the once sharp, alert eyes that had watched over the woods with unwavering vigilance now appeared tired. The natural forces of time were catching up with her, and wildlife experts, who had followed her story for years, began to express concerns that she might not survive another harsh winter. Her once mighty frame had become thinner, and her coat had lost some of its luster. Old Scar, the protector of Pine Hollow, was nearing the end of her long life. Timmy, now a young boy, had begun to notice the changes in Old Scar. He could no longer feel her presence as closely as he once had, and the bear seemed to be withdrawing, seeking solitude in the deeper parts of the forest. Timmy understood that her time was drawing near. While he was still a child, he had learned the hard lessons of loss and love, and he knew that even the strongest creatures eventually must face the end. The connection he had felt with Old Scar was profound, and he had come to understand that this was simply a part of the natural order. He knew, however, that she would always remain a part of him. Her lessons, her spirit, and her protection forever imprinted on his heart. One autumn afternoon, Timmy ventured into the forest, alone, as he had done many times before. He knew that Old Scar was out there, somewhere, and he had a feeling that this would be their final meeting. As he walked along the familiar paths, he found a quiet clearing where he had often seen the bear in the past. There, standing in the shadows of the trees, was Old Scar. Her fur had grown thinner, and she looked even older than before. but there was still the unmistakable glint in her eyes. The same watchful gaze that had kept him safe all those years ago. Timmy approached slowly, speaking softly to her, as if she could hear him, as if their bond transcended words. He reached out his hand, but instead of approaching her as he once would have, he stopped at a distance. He knew this was a moment of farewell. Old Scar, recognizing him, gave him one last look, a gaze that spoke volumes, full of quiet understanding and perhaps, in her own way, gratitude. Timmy said goodbye, quietly and solemnly, knowing that this was the end of one chapter in his life, but the beginning of another. In the years that followed, Old Scar passed away, peacefully, as wildlife experts had anticipated. The news was met with sadness in Pine Hollow, but the people of the town knew that the bear had lived a long and meaningful life. Her legacy would endure in the stories passed down, in the sanctuary created in her honor, and in the lessons she had taught the people of Pine Hollow. Old Scar had become more than just a bear. She had become a symbol of the bond between humans and animals, of the protection and care that could exist between different species. Timmy, now in his teenage years, found himself more determined than ever to continue the work that had begun with Old Scar. His family had always been committed to preserving the forest, but after the bear's passing, Timmy took on a more active role. He worked tirelessly to ensure that the sanctuary remained a safe place for wildlife and that the forest would continue to thrive. He was no longer just the boy who had been saved by a bear. He had become an advocate, using his voice and his experiences to inspire others to care for the natural world. As he grew older, Timmy's connection with nature deepened. He spent his days studying animal behavior, learning about the delicate balance of ecosystems, and finding ways to protect the habitats that were home to so many creatures. His passion for conservation grew stronger with each passing year, and he began to give talks at local schools and community events, sharing the story of Old Scar and the lessons he had learned from her. At 18, Timmy stood before a crowd at the sanctuary, ready to speak about his experiences with the bear who had saved him. He had grown into a young man with a deep understanding of the world around him, and he felt a responsibility to pass on the wisdom he had gained. As he stood there, looking out at the people who had gathered to hear him speak, Timmy shared the message that had shaped his life: "We are all connected." He said, his voice steady and clear, "The forest is always trying to speak to us, and we just need to learn how to listen." These words, simple yet profound, captured the essence of the bond he had shared with Old Scar, a bond that transcended species, a bond rooted in compassion and understanding. Timmy's message resonated deeply with the community. His words sparked a renewed commitment to conservation, and the people of Pine Hollow redoubled their efforts to protect the forest and its wildlife. The sanctuary, once a quiet place of reflection, became a hub for education and activism, a place where people of all ages could come to learn about the importance of preserving the natural world. Timmy's voice, once that of a young boy who had been saved by a bear, had become a powerful tool for change. As Timmy entered adulthood, his work in wildlife conservation continued to thrive. He traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, participating in environmental campaigns, and working with organizations dedicated to protecting the Earth's endangered species. But no matter where he went, Timmy always returned to Pine Hollow, to the sanctuary where his journey had begun. There, in the quiet woods, he could still feel the presence of old Scar, the bear who had shaped his life in ways he could never fully explain. Her legacy lived on in the work he did, in the community he helped to build, and in the lessons he shared with others. The town of Pine Hollow, once a quiet, secluded place, had become a center for conservation efforts, attracting people from all over who sought to learn from the examples set by Timmy and his family. The sanctuary had grown into a symbol of hope, of compassion, and of the enduring power of nature. The people of Pine Hollow had come to understand that their connection to the forest was more than just a relationship with the land. It was a relationship with all the creatures who called it home. A relationship built on respect, understanding, and love. As Timmy continued his work, he often thought back to that moment in the forest, when he had said goodbye to old Scar. It was a moment of sadness, but also of profound gratitude. He had been saved by the bear, but more importantly, he had been taught the most important lesson of all, the interconnectedness of all living things. That lesson had shaped his life, and it would continue to shape the world around him. For generations to come, the legacy of old Scar, the bear who had protected him when he was most vulnerable, would never fade. It would live on in the forest, in the sanctuary, and in the hearts of all who learned to listen to the wisdom of nature.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.